All right, our next unit is going to be on self and self-concept, and it's really closely connected to perception. If you think about how you perceive yourself, it really drives how you act, how you think, how other people perceive you, and sometimes that perception can be incorrect. And we're going to talk a lot about how your self-concept was developed and how that's connected to perception. So what I want you to do right now is pause this video and watch this YouTube video. I've included the link to the YouTube video on the task sheet, and it's also in the module. It's the Dove commercial. A couple years ago, Dove began a campaign where they wanted to really help influence perception of self and beauty and some of the things that they are trying to sell and market. Remember that it is a product, so they are selling a product, but ultimately they were really trying to show that how you view yourself is often not how other people view you. And this commercial is targeted towards women, but it's going to kind of show how powerful it can be when you view yourself one way, and you see the way other people view you. So pause this video, go watch the perception on self and the Dove commercial, and then answer the first question on the task sheet. So watch the YouTube video, answer the first question on the task sheet, and then come back to resume this lecture. Okay, so as you can see, the way we view ourselves is not always how other people view us, and that's really important because that's a part of how we define our self-concept. There's a lot of communication theory that states that communication is actually how we come to an understanding of who we are and the kind of person that we are, and that we develop ourselves in the process of communicating with others. So particularly in the first 5 years of your life, when you're sort of developing a sense of self, how people communicate to you about yourself, and how you communicate in your head about yourself really defines your self-concept. And if you think about who the people are that you interact with the most in those first 5 years, it's your immediate family, your parents, your siblings, and other relatives. You're not really, until you go to kindergarten or preschool, you're really interacting only with immediate family. So there's a lot of theory that says that how you're treated and how you're raised in the first 5 years of your life is a direct connection to how you view yourself and your self-concept later on in life. So as we talk about some of these terms connected to self-identity and development, think about, your family and the people that helped raise you, and think about how much of an impact they had on your self-concept. And then also think about all the kids you interact with that are 5 or younger, and recognize how powerful your communication is to them and their development of self. There's something called the self-concept circle, and the self-concept circle shows how important other people are in our development of self. How you see yourself drives your actions, which drive how other people see you, which drives their reactions, which then impacts how I see myself. If I see myself as a really smart student, as somebody who has a lot of knowledge and is a good learner, then that's going to drive my actions, right? Because I'm going to do well in school, I'm going to turn in homework, I'm going to answer questions in class. Other people will then start to see me as intelligent, and they'll start that'll be part of my reputation. People will ask for homework help. They'll say things like, oh, they're really smart, right? That's their reaction to me. And that will then drive how I see myself. So that works in a really positive way. Think about how that could work in a negative way. If I am worried that maybe I am not very attractive, right? So that drives my actions. I'm not very outgoing. I don't portray a lot of self-confidence. So other people see me as shy or insecure, which then they kind of stay away from, right? Which then reinforces the idea that I don't feel this certain way, which then drives more of my actions. So you can see how you can get stuck in either a negative or positive loop here when you're building your self-concept. And this happens so subconsciously, you don't even know that it does. Right now, I want you to pause and go to TED.com. and you're going to watch a TED Talk. So you're going to search for the psychology of your future self. It gives you this direction and the link on the task sheet. And it's a quick one, but he's going to talk about how much you change over time and how the self that you are now is not the self that you will always be. And then I want you to answer 2 questions, when you finish watching that TED Talk. Difference between self-concept and self-esteem. When we use those terms, we're using them in different ways. So self-concept is a much deeper conception and belief about yourself. It's how you view yourself as a whole. It's how you think you are, but not necessarily the truth. It's how you view yourself and how you want other people to view you. It's how you view yourself and the actions you have because of that. So this whole idea of like self-concept is much deeper. It's a holistic picture of who you are. In self-esteem is more how you feel about that in terms of emotions. So you may think that you're like a certain way, and that's your self-concept. Your self-concept is, I'm very smart, I am a really good student, and I feel really positive about that. That's self-concept and self-esteem, right? Or you may think, I'm not an attractive person, and you feel really negative about yourself, right? Your self-concept is that view of yourself in terms of attractiveness, and your self-concept or your self-esteem is how you feel about that, negative or positive. I really like this quote, I am not who I think I am not who you think I am who I think you think I am. And that really shows you that self-concept is so driven by other people's perception of us, and that really feeds into how we feel about ourselves, and not always in a positive way. Also, when we talk about self, you have to recognize that we aren't always the same person, right? Who you are with friends or in public, right, is not who you often are by yourself. So the closer you can bring those together, and especially in relationships, if you feel like you can be, that private self with somebody and not feel like that's being judged or impacted negatively, right? That's a more healthy place to be in the end. So let's do some work and see what your self-concept is like right now. So the first thing I want you to do is go back to the handout, and I want you to list 15 accomplishments that you have done. So accomplishments can be an accomplishment, it can be a unique characteristic or a talent that you have, it can be a dream, it can be anything that is a part of who you think you are. So an accomplishment, something you've already done, a goal that you have, I want to do this, and it's hard to do this, right? It's really hard to do this. So you're going to write down on the task sheet the 15 statements. So here are 2 examples. So I put something I have done. I have traveled to 4 different countries, right? That's something about me. I have begun training for a half Ironman, right? So that's something I'd like to do. That's a goal that I have. So these are the positive statements. As soon as you get the positive statements, you're going to go to the next part of the task sheet, and you're going to turn those positives, or those accomplishments into positive statements. So sorry, that was confusing. This part right here is the accomplishment, right? So those 2 examples were my accomplishment or my goal or the unique thing about me. You're going to change those into positive statements. You're going to look at that and you're going to say, what does this say about me? And you're going to pick 5 of them, only 5 of the accomplishments, dreams, goals, talents that you listed, and you're going to change them into what are called affirmations. So affirmations are positive statements about yourself based on a fact, right? Based on something that you can trace back and you can say is credible. So if I say I have traveled to 4 different countries, then a positive affirmation is I'm adventurous, right? Or I began training for a half Ironman, I'm ambitious. So pick 5 of the 15 that you listed and transform those into positive statements. Once you've done that, there's a lot of research that indicates if you use those affirmations in your daily routine, if you say these things to yourself when you feel your self-concept is under attack, it can actually be a defense against that. It's against what outside influences might impact your self-concept. It's really helpful to do this to little kids who are still forming their self-concept, to say, you did so well on your spelling test on Friday. You are very smart, right? And you sort of give them these affirmations. But when we're older, we need to do those affirmations for ourselves. And so this is a place where you can start using things about you, transforming them into positive statements, and then saying those statements almost like a mantra or like a part of your morning routine. And that can really help, especially if you feel like you have a low self-concept or a low self-esteem. These positive affirmations can help. So I'm excited to see what you wrote down, and you'll submit this document in the assignment with those positive statements and the 15 things about you. Now, according to George Mead, who is a research psychologist from the 1950s, he believed that self-concept comes from two different perspectives. They come from particular others, so specific people who are connected to us, and generalized other, which is like the media or society. And the way I remember the two of these is that in the textbook they call them the personalized other. And it's the same thing. It's the idea that my particular others are different from your particular others. So who impacted my self-concept and my perception of myself is different than yours. My family members, my peers and friends and romantic partners are different than yours. However, we share some of the same generalized other, right? The media, society, religion, possibly, right? Those are going to be the similar generalized other. So when you think about who impacted your self-esteem, your particular others are those people who are close to you and not maybe the same as other people's particular others. So we're going to take a minute and talk about 4 aspects of the personalized or the particular others. Make sure you're writing these down. There are 4 ways that these particular others can directly influence our self-concept. And we'll go through each of these: direct definitions, reflected appraisals, attachment styles, and identity scripts. So the first is direct definitions. And this is just as it sounds. You are directly told, particularly as a little kid, by what you are, by explicitly being labeled and your behaviors, right? So we'll say something like, you're such a smart kid, or you're so athletic, or you're so talented, or you're so kind, right? If your parents give you these direct definitions when you're young, right, that starts to form your self-concept. We might even say girls don't hit. So like gender and racial and ethnic identity is also directly defined for us. So if you think about the impact of that, positive direct definitions can really build our self-esteem. If we tell a 3-year-old over and over again that they're smart, that they're strong, that they're kind, right? Their parents are telling them this, then they're going to have a really healthy self-esteem and perception of themselves. However, this can really work against you too, right? If you think about adults who are verbally abusive to children and really label them negatively, this can have a direct impact on their self-concept and their self-worth. So you really need to be careful and almost over-enthusiastic around kids under 5, right? And be really careful about what you say about them, because their self-concept is still being formed, and we want that to be positive, right? Not negative. So you kind of have to be aware of that. The second is called reflected appraisal. And this is how other people see us is then reflected back to us. So it's not necessarily so direct as the direct definition. It's more behavior. So it's not necessarily the words that are said, but behavior. So people will let us know when behavior's inappropriate. So like you'll be at the store and you'll be throwing a tantrum as a 3-year-old, and your parents will be like, this is not how we behave, right? And they'll pull you aside and let you know that that's inappropriate, right? So they, instead of telling you directly who you are, they reflect back disappointment or approval through their nonverbals and verbal actions that impact your self-concept. And really, people fall into 3 categories. They're uppers, right? They reflect positive appraisals of us and our self-worth. So they say really positive direct definitions and they respond to us in a loving and kind way. They can be downers. So they're always critical of us and critical of what we do and say. Their nonverbals often reflect that they're, disappointed or disapproving. And so you're getting that sort of negative reflection. And what is really dangerous are what they call vultures. And these are people who don't just reflect back negativity, but they they go out of their way to attack your self-concept. So it has way more motive to it, right? These are people who for some reason, because of their own insecurities and their own problems, will not respond to you in a positive way and go out of their way to pull you down too. These are people you should avoid relationships with and friendships with. They're not just reflecting negative things to you where you can say, I get a sense that you don't like it when I do this. Talk to me about it, right? Or that you're frustrated with me because of this. These are people who target your self-concept and your self-esteem. And those are people you need to avoid. What happens and what's really dangerous with reflected appraisals is you can fall into something called self-fulfilling prophecies. And self-fulfilling prophecies are when we're told something so much, we're told that we're away so much that we internalize that judgment or that expectation and we behave that way. If someone tells you that you're not good enough or not smart enough or not strong enough so much, like eventually it's really hard not to just become that, right? And not to just have that be who you are. So you sort of have to actively work against negative direct definitions and reflected appraisals so that that doesn't become a part of who you are, right? But this can also work in a positive way, right? If someone tells you that you're smart or that you can do it or that you're athletic and you can accomplish things, right? Then you can become that as well. So it can work in a really positive way too. The third is called identity scripts, and this is done more in a generalized way with your particular or personalized others. This is when your family members tell you, in this family, we're this way, or in this religion, we're this way. And it's like these rules for living an identity that are given to you because you belong to a particular group or family, or religion or whatever, right? So we are responsible people, or education is key to your success, right? There are these sort of generalized beliefs, although they're particular to everybody. In my family, my parents would always say, we are people who are on time, right? So my family was always really punctual. Or my dad would say things like, other people's names are safe in our home, whenever we would start to gossip or something like that. So those became internalized in me, right? And became a part of who I am. So think about, some of the identity scripts that are given to you and your family and formed part of who you are, right? They say they're formed really early at a really young age. They're already ingrained in who you are. The fourth is called attachment styles, and I find this really, really fascinating. This is the concept that how you were parented, right? The type of parenting style you were given directly impacts your self-concept. And there are 4 styles, so you'll want to make sure you take notes on these: secure, anxious, ambivalent, dismissive, and fearful. So how you were parented has a direct connection to how you are. So let's look at an example. Look at the most positive ones, the secure parenting style. So this helps you develop a positive view of yourself and a positive view of others. So the caregiver doesn't necessarily have to be your biological parent, but whoever raised you responds to you in a consistent and attentive and loving way. So it's always consistent. It's always kind, right? They still discipline you, but they do it with love. So you develop a positive self-worth and a positive view of others. That's the ideal. Think about how you were parented. Did it fall into that category? There are 3 others that are less than ideal. The fearful is a negative view of self and a negative view of others. So the person who took care of you is often not around or communicates in a negative or even abusive way. So if that's the case, then the child infers that somehow they are unworthy of love and that other people aren't loving. Think about how that would impact you as an adult, right? Or even as a teenager. It would directly impact your self-concept. If you think that you are unworthy of love, it would impact relationships that you have as an adult. If you feel that people aren't kind and loving, right, then you're going to maybe get trapped in relationships that are more unhealthy. So you can see how that would really impact an adult or even, someone your age, a teenager getting ready to go to adulthood, right? It's going to impact your self-concept. The other 2 are dismissive. So the caregiver is not interested. So they might be around, but uninterested, rejecting, and unavailable to the children. So this is an interesting one because in a dismissive as opposed to the fearful, the child doesn't view themselves as unlovable. Instead, they learn that behavior and treat people as unworthy. So they don't internalize it in a dismissive, they just mimic it and treat other people that way as well. So I apologize if you hear my neighbor's dog barking as I'm recording this, but it can't be helped. The last and the most dangerous is anxious ambivalent, and this is the inconsistent treatment by a caregiver. So sometimes the caregiver is there and loving and attentive, and then sometimes it's not. And so the only consistent thing the child can infer is that it's about them, right? They are the only consistent in that equation. So they believe that they deserve that or that it's their fault. And they really internalize that and believe that they're the source of the problem. I have a friend who went through a pretty awful divorce, and her ex-husband is an alcoholic, has been arrested a couple times. And so he's really anxious ambivalent. He'll get better for a while and he'll come into her kid's life and be really, really great. And then he'll struggle and disappear for a while, or he'll say he's going to be somewhere and then he's not. And sometimes he is for some kids and not for others. So she has to actively work against this anxious ambivalent self-concept, and really try to show these kids that it's not their fault if their dad shows up sometimes and not other times, right? Because she really wants them to infer the secure attachment as opposed to what happens here with the anxious ambivalent style. There is something interesting to note that often attachment styles are connected to your socioeconomic class, that sometimes we can look at places that have high levels of poverty and see more of the anxious, the fearful, the less positive aspects or attachment styles. So that's the personalized other. That's how you internalize information about yourself. The generalized other is really quick. It's not as detailed. It basically says that through interactions with people outside of our personalized other, with media and technology, with institutions in our society, we understand who we are, right? So that's where like the Dove commercial comes in. That's the idea that in media, the media is telling, everybody something about what it is to be a woman or a man or a teenager or, something like that. So that's the generalized other. And in our culture, the generalized other communicates the most about race, gender, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic class. So those are the messages we receive the most, is what it means to be a certain race, a certain gender, a certain sexual orientation, and belong to a certain socioeconomic class. So that's ultimately what is communicated to us. There's a really great theory that comes out of self-concept and perception, and it's called social comparison. And I really love this theory. It just basically says that we are constantly assessing ourselves in relation to those around us. And we look at someone else and how they do something, and we internalize a judgment about ourselves based on that. Imagine that you are constantly measuring people around you with a yard, sort of like a measuring stick, right? Like an attractive, here's a measuring stick for attractiveness. And I look around and I look at this person on my left and I think, oh, I'm a little more attractive than them. And then I look at this person on my right and I'm like, I'm not as attractive as them. So you sort of decide on the sliding scale where you fall, and that's how you determine all sorts of things like your talents, your abilities, all of that. There's a theory that says that we are drawn to people in our same sort of level of abilities and attractiveness and talents. Think about your friends. Are you all about the same level of attractiveness? It's weird to think about your friends that way, but think about that. Are you all about the same level of intelligence, ambition, right? Because we don't like to be around people that make us feel too inferior, right? We don't want to be around somebody who's like clear up the ladder in terms of intelligence when we feel that we're down farther in the ladder, right? That would constantly be an attack on our self-concept. So we avoid that. So the theory states, social comparison theory, that you're going to stick to a really close assessment of people around you of the same level as you, right? We're going to avoid people who we feel are way less attractive or smart or talented than us, and way more, because we want to have a good self-esteem. So I find that really interesting when you see people together and how they interact and see how closely that's related. So how can you improve your self-concept? First of all, understanding where it's formed. Think about your personalized other, your direct definitions, your reflective phrasals. And then also, what's really interesting is that they found that if you become better at self-disclosure and talking about yourself not in a conceited way, but in the experiences and the things that happen to you and the goals and hopes and things that you want in your life, and the more accepting people are of that, the higher our self-esteem can build as well. And there's a theory, and I would draw this little chart called the Johari window. And the Johari window is a theory that says, here's how you get better at self-disclosure. They say there are 4 categories of self-identity and concept. And I really find this interesting. There are things that you know about yourself that other people know about you. This is open information, right? That it could be anything. It could be, that you're an intelligent person, or that you have certain hobbies or talents, or that something happened to you when you were little, right? And people all know, right? It's open information. What they say in improving your self-concept is that we all have something that is hidden, right? We know this information, but other people don't know that information. So it's hidden. And that in relationships, we have to be vulnerable and reveal some of this hidden stuff, maybe part of our past experiences or hopes and fears that we have, right? By giving that information and moving it to open information and have it be accepted by other people, it helps us grow and builds our self-concept. What I really like are these 2 categories, the blind and the unknown. This one is really fascinating to me. What are things that you don't know about yourself that other people know about you, right? And how do you get access to that information? It's through really asking questions when conflicts arise, when people are frustrated with you, really trying to understand why, doing a lot of self-reflection. I handled this situation this way. How could I have done it better, right? And trying to move some of that blind information into the open. The one I find the most fascinating is the unknown. The idea that there is some information that you don't know about yourself and that other people don't know about you. And that there's no way to know what that is until you have some life experience. Really, they say, to build your self-concept and to really understand yourself, you have to gain access to those blind and unknown areas. So trying new experiences, putting yourself in new situations, or communicating with other people really helps you to understand that. I remember a couple years ago, my brother was driving down to Las Vegas and he witnessed a really bad accident. A man in front of him in a car ran into the cement divider. And so my brother was driving with my sister-in-law, and my sister-in-law said as soon as the accident happened, kind of right in front of them, my brother pulled over and he ran towards this man and helped him out of his car and had to do CPR and didn't even know that he remembered CPR, right? And called 911 and really took charge in this emergency and helped this person who had been injured in this accident. And I remember my sister-in-law saying, I didn't know that's how he would respond in an emergency. I'd never seen him in a situation like that. And I had never been in an immediate emergent situation like that. And I sort of froze, but he sprang into action. And my brother was like, I had no idea either, but it was instinctual, right? And so he learned something about himself, but he didn't just learn that, he reflected upon it, and processed it and moved that unknown information into open information. So just remember that self-disclosure can be tricky. You want it to be appropriate. You want to go slow and make sure that trust is in the relationship before you disclose this information. And I also think it's really helpful to set goals when you're trying to improve your self-concept. Avoid social comparison. Realize that you'll change over time. Avoid self-sabotage, which is very similar to a self-fulfilling prophecy, and really act as an upper for yourself by using those positive affirmations. So that's it. That's our discussion on self and perception. We're going to do an activity next time where we have you do some reflection about your personalized other, and how that developed your self-concept. But for now, that's the end of the notes. So upload the document that the task sheet document into the assignment.